Man like Mark Sullivan, worry yourself. Stay tuned for the thrilling episode. Woo!
A positive mental attitude can clear away all obstacles which stand between you and your major purpose in life.
This is the Snowboard Project featuring Mark Sullivan and the Bees. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.
Do this.
Okay. Welcome back to the Snowboard Project. I'm Mark Sullivan.
And I'm the Bees.
The Bees?
I am the Beeve.
Let's do this again.
No, I just totally got my name wrong, but we roll with these things, right?
Okay, well, let's roll with it. Fine. So this is our second installment of Flight Week.
Flight Week.
That's right. And so today I do an interview with Eric Luthart. And Eric is the guy who basically I go back and forth with to design the snowboard. But before we design the snowboard tomorrow, we're going to talk to Eric and get his background just to establish his credibility as a board designer, as an expert in manufacturing, and just being able to turn out a high quality product.
Now, how did you know about Eric Luthart? How did you find him, or why did you decide that Eric was the guy to do this?
Well, I've known Eric for years. So he got his start at Ride Snowboards. He was a designer there. He built also his own boards and in his garage, right? He was just passionate about boards and their construction, and then he got a job at Ride, and I met him when he worked at Flow Snowboards, and Flow is a title sponsor of Tailgate Alaska, so I got to know everyone at Flow, and he was one of the guys.
Gotcha.
And he was their headboard designer. He designed the Solitude, the Darwin, the Scotty Lego model. He designed all their boards from Grom to free ride boards,
right?
And I rode those boards. I tried them out, rode the Flow boards, and they were good.
Yeah.
And so I was like, cool, man. And then after he left Flow, he took a job with the company that actually manufactured the Flow boards called GP87. And they're based in China. And now they manufacture just a plethora of these just the super hardcore brands that need super high quality.
Right.
Basically, that's their thing, is like high quality. And also you don't have to do huge production runs, and that's what allowed us to do this flight kind of tribute board, let's call it the Rocket 167. And so anyhow, this first episode though, I talked to Eric about his background.
All right, well, should we roll into it?
Yeah, let's hear about Eric Luthart. All right, welcome to the show. Today I have a special guest. Every day I have a special guest, but today it's Eric Luthart. And Eric, I met when he was working as the head board designer for Flow Snowboards. Flow was a sponsor of Tailgate Alaska, but Eric has just such a long history in terms of board design and understanding the construction and all the aspects that go into making a snowboard work. Eric works now with all sorts of different brands. There's a factory out of China, and he could talk about that a little bit. But, man, you make some of the best boards, I would say, in China anyway, including, some, I don't even know if I'm allowed to mention the brands that you manufacture. Am I?
Yeah, I need to kind of get it okay from the brands.
Okay,
some of them are
I get
about that.
I got that. So let's not talk about that. Let's start out with how did you get involved? How did you get involved with designing snowboards?
Actually, it's just as soon as I started riding, I just started thinking about it. Actually, I've always been kind of an overthinker, a little bit of a tinker. I rhymed. And just really, actually, from the 80s, I started thinking about it. And I knew I wanted to be in the snowboard industry. I knew I couldn't be as a rider. And my passion was always about the boards and just, the technical side of it. And that's just how I eventually got started with it. Mm-hmm. And from there, there wasn't really any internet yet. So I used to go to the library, study on like making boats, planes, anything,
Mm-hmm.
how you make stuff at home, and just started doing it myself, teaching myself.
Did you go to school for engineering or design or manufacture, something like that? Or are you self-taught?
I took a CAD course. I don't know when that was, back in the 90s, and it basically just definitely helped. It's really hard to manually draw a snowboard, so it was really nice just to kind of get an idea, and so CAD was really, really helped me get into it. Now I'm gonna actually put something on paper, make a file.
Right. So did you make your own boards in the beginning? Were you like manufacturing, kind of garage shopping it, or were you just kind of dreaming up these new ideas and always wondering, what it would ride like without the actual, making of the board?
I started actually working at Ride snowboards back in the mid 90s, and I worked in the warehouse in there, and I was an R&D writer for Ride as well back then. So I got to ride a bunch of different products, and it was fun just seeing the difference between boards. I mean, some boards literally within 10 feet, your first turn, you can tell.
Right.
Nothing's right or wrong. So yeah, that's kind of also like really like was interesting to see just the differences of how things feel. So.
Yeah. So.
Yep.
How did you make that transition from warehouse guy, R&D rider to actual board designer?
I came to a kind of a ride at that time too. It got a little weird. It was
the public traded part of Ride. Is that around?
Yeah, when everything kind of blew up, and I ended up going my own way. I realized things weren't going to go very well, so I left and ended up working at a small factory in Bellevue, Washington, making like longboards for like G&S. Made like some of the first kite boards. Got to work a lot of materials, and so that's where I actually I had a little bit of CAD experience at that point, and so there I was actually able to kind of work on designing and seeing stuff happen. Not necessarily for snowboards, but just seeing how things look from the computer. Taking something from your head, putting it on a computer, and seeing it in real life, and seeing when they actually all come together. So that takes a little bit to actually have that happen. So.
Yeah, and then I imagine too, it's like CAD is an outline, a drawing, but then once you're starting to actually work with materials that have different properties, it takes on a whole different dimension in terms of combining those properties, making sure they're going to work together, but also be durable too and performance oriented. So is that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, that was the thing too. So actually, at the factory, so I think that was in '97 or something like that. I got to work with doing skateboards. We were making composite skateboards then, so they're vertically laminated, wood cores and everything. And I was working at the Ham, and I was like, wow, it was kind of an interesting material. And so I actually started getting into things like, I didn't like dealing with fiberglass so much, so that was kind of like my early started looking at materials that were, easier to work with. I mean, I know people talk about environmentally friendly, but there's also environmentally friendly within the factory that people forget, and it was interesting working with materials like that and seeing how the performance or the durability is with certain materials.
Yep.
And in some cases, how certain. Yep.
So I don't think people really talk about that very much, but it really, there isn't very much environmental to hold your hat on or to hang your hat on as far as snowboards are concerned. They're not a very environmentally friendly product in general.
No, not at all. No, I mean, there's things you can kind of recycle. There's things you can claim. But yeah, it's kind of it's not, but there is an environment within a factory that is important for workers. Hey, you bandsaw boards, you're getting fiberglass all over you, you're breathing it, getting sensitized to epoxy, things like that are real things.
Yeah.
And it's not something that people talk about, but those are important things too.
Totally. I remember that K2 came out with this board. I think they call it the Recycler, maybe. And it was like supposed to be like this environmentally friendly style snowboard. And at the time, I would just remember being disgusted by it because I was like, there's nothing environmentally friendly about this. This is actually like greenwashing. You're just doing this for the sake of marketing. And I love K2. I love a lot of people there, whatever. I'm not, putting it down. But that board in particular was like, I went to school for environmental studies before I went to school for marketing. And, just this whole concept of greenwashing really always rubbed me the wrong way. And so I've never appreciated brands that hold that think that that's a marketable thing where marketing the environmental consciousness or friendliness of a product is more to increase sales than it is to actually be environmentally conscious in the world. And honestly, all you're doing is trying to sell more of it so you can actually add more bad stuff to the, to the world, basically, or more unenvironmental stuff or non-recyclable stuff to the world. So that was kind of my take.
Yeah, and I actually, the very first factory I worked with in China, there was a brand there that was making a board that was kind of the first launch of like the whatever eco-friendly thing, how much they're saving on carbon emissions and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I saw how much effort, energy was spent on these boards, and I talked to the factory owners, and it's like these were the least environmentally friendly boards there were. I mean, just the amount of it was like it had the materials, but to try to make materials work together that aren't
necessarily compatible, right?
Yeah. And I've talked with epoxy suppliers too, and they're like, "Oh, this is great," and then we test it, and it's like it's not great. I mean, it's cool what you're doing, I love it, but the board, it just isn't going to last, And so yeah, it's. I don't think it's very good to have an environmentally friendly board that ends up in a landfill. So
yeah, exactly. To me, the most environmentally friendly board is the one that lasts the longest.
Yep.
The one you get the most use out of. And so, while Never Summer builds boards in America, right? But they make a durable board. Those things never break, basically, So at least they're making something that lasts a long, long time, And there's a certain amount of environmentally friendly stuff aspect to that if a board lasts twice as long as one that's just slapped together, Yeah,
and also not just lasts so long, but actually holds its performance. So, I mean, it doesn't do any good to get a board that has a ton of pop and has its camber. Then after 6-7 days, pop's gone, camber's gone. So those are important factors too. You want a board to actually perform for its life.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Would you say like growing things organically could be likened a lot to like growing things organically?
Yeah. Like what do you have in mind? Like tomatoes?
Because we're trying to
Let's
grow
say, for instance, tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
so
like
tomatoes need sunlight. And
like
they
if you buy
need
like,
some water and they need some soil.
Right. No, I have friends who would like, they would actually like buy these lights and they would grow tomatoes indoors organically.
Okay. So can we liken the lights and in our fake sunlight to Patreon subscribers?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like, yes, you will be our metal halide lights.
You too can be our grow lights. So why don't you help us grow? If you're interested in helping us grow, go to patreon.com/the Snowboard Project and help us grow to be a bigger independent voice in snowboarding. We want to bring you an organic experience that is grass fed and
grass fed.
I have no idea.
Okay.
All right.
Oh yeah, and by the way, also subscribe, rate, review. review on iTunes, on Google Podcasts, on any of our podcasting platforms. That's also going to help us grow, help get the word out, and also tell your friends, right? If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends, let your snowboarding buddies know.
But also let your friends that like to grow tomatoes know too. Just saying.
So then let's take your career forward from making the vertically landed skateboards, longboards, and the wakeboards. What was the first snowboard you designed? Who did you first work for designing snowboards? Obviously, you came from Ride, but like when did you actually design a snowboard?
My first board, first couple I designed were ones I made at my house when I was living in West Seattle. Mm-hmm. So I built them in my basement, and yeah, it was kind of interesting. It was just, kind of copying other boards, like using existing boards for kind of like to do the side cut and tweaking a few things here and there.
Was it a vacuum bag?
Yeah. Yep. Cool. Yeah. So I didn't have internet, so it was literally going to the library. It was kind of funny, and trying to find materials to see what works and things like that. So, but it was fun, it was, it's kind of like having an ugly kid. It's ugly, but still your kid. And that's how my first boards were not pretty.
Yeah. How did they ride?
About as well as they looked. They did function, but getting your flex right. Oh my gosh. When you're hand profiling boards and I made a mistake putting too much carbon in, so all of a sudden things stiff as all get, and they sucked. But I made a board and I learned, and then realized, next time you do something a little different, and they got definitely a lot better as the more I made.
Right. So let's keep going forward. So now you've made a few snowboards. They get better and better every time you're making another one. How many of those basement boards did you make?
I think I made about just like 6 or 7 boards, and by then I've also was starting to design boards too. Like I couldn't necessarily make everything I designed because I didn't have access to, CNC equipment. I basically make something I could actually, build. And I think actually, I'm trying to think. First boards, and then I did first boards I actually did as far as designing for a company was Illuminati snowboards with Lance Pittman.
Yeah.
And I did Smoke and Jay boards. Super Park and the girls board. I can't remember, but they won Goodwood awards, so that was, a good start. So,
right. So you're starting to have some success, and then at a certain point, you started working for Flow and became their head board designer. And really, I mean, it seems like you had to do a whole line of boards. You had to have an appropriate kids board, flex pattern, side cut, rocker, whatever. That had to be appropriate, but you also had to make a powder board, a high performance directional board, a twin board, et cetera, et cetera. How did you figure out how to get all of those different categories right? Like, how were you?
Well,
Go ahead.
For the kids board, I just looked at a Burton catalog and just guesstimated it. To be totally honest, I was like, I didn't have kids at the time. And I'm like, how do you design an 80 centimeter board? I'm like, I have no freaking clue. It's like what side cut to use, and then of course trying to do a flex. I mean, those things are so thin you can't even put inserts in them. So those were interesting. Yeah. But when I first came to Flow, it was actually kind of cool because Flow had not changed. They had moved their operations from Austria and to San Francisco.
Right.
And so I came on Jack Coughlin. I knew him from Ride, so he hooked me up. And so I just started working there. And there wasn't really anybody there that knew boards that well. So it was pretty easy for me to kind of, at a pretty, some freedom to screw up, I guess you'd say, or to learn. I had time to learn. And Flow wasn't really doing well with boards. I mean, we were only selling, a few thousand back then. So
Only a few thousand, huh?
yeah, back then that was nothing. I know nowadays that's like huge.
Yeah. That's funny. So what was like your favorite, like in that initial time? What were like some of your favorite boards that you designed, and why?
I think actually Solitude was one of my favorite boards. It was actually before I actually got into a company, I wanted to have my own snowboard brand, and Solitude was just kind of a name I had, not for the ski area in Utah, but just, because I was a one-man show. I often did backcountry by myself. It was just something, just kind of a personal thing. So I used that name for that model, and that was just the board it's just the way I rode. I liked more big mountain stuff, but I also liked to be able to, dabble around, the ski area. And so that board was one of my early favorites. And, so that was probably, I'd say that was probably my favorite early on board.
Cool. And then, how long were you with Flow in total?
Full-time employee, like 9 years, I think. And then I was a contractor for a couple of years after.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, at that time, just the market, the market just went to crap. And, it just became just tougher. So, I was just a contractor. And then I started working with, GP87.
Yep.
And so that worked out really well. So I was able to continue my dream.
So maybe you could set up, because GP87 is not something that's actually probably known by the general snowboarder. So why don't you explain what GP87 is, how it came about, and what you guys do?
So actually it was from a guy, a friend of mine, Dan. I met him probably the same thing, probably like 10 years prior. He had a factory called Yaki, and he started in the U.S. and then closed it down, then restarted it again in China. Anyway, so we had talked over the years, just at trade shows, Skype, stuff like that. And then, he left Yaki, and I was at Flow, and he's like, I'm thinking of, starting up a new factory. And so that's how we just got back in together. And so we always want to work together. So it was fun. And he had already been doing a lot of the Japanese powder boards all around. So he's kind of doing stuff I wanted to get into, that market. Mm-hmm. It was pretty over just doing twins.
Wait, how could you make Japanese powder boards in China? I thought they were Japanese.
Japanese marketed.
Okay.
Well, made near Japan.
Made near Japan. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, keep going.
Yeah. So and then we came up with the name. 87 was the very first year he started making snowboards, and GP actually stands for that's what he called his grandpa. When he first started snowboarding, his grandfather helped him make his first snowboards. So that was just kind of an ode to him. So that's where GP87 stands for.
Cool. That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's been fun. It's not like other factories. I mean, I think I've been to probably about 30 different factories over my life for snowboards. Some of the big usual ones, and there was things that's like being able to help start a factory from scratch is pretty fun, because I love the flexibility that Dan had at his old factory, but I also like some of the things that were done at GST, that, some of the automation, some of the, this is just how we have to do it. Mm-hmm. And GST had gone out of business probably about a year after we started. And I also learned from that too, just kind of, why factories shut down. So really focus on that, being flexible for our customer, doing things that other factories won't do or can't do. And then also making boards that we ourselves want to ride. Mm-hmm. we don't want to sit there and like, if it looks like a piece of crap, you know, with what they want, it's like, you know, we'll try to steer them along, you know, say, we've been doing this for years. We'll make you a good board, you know, let us do it. Yeah. So I mean, in most cases we design for everybody too.
Yeah. It occurs to me that GP87 is actually one of the most high quality factories in China, just based on the brands that won't be mentioned, whose boards you make. Right. And it seems like it's actually a high quality product, whereas some people are very quick to write off made in China as something that's inferior of quality.
Well, yeah, we've had some employees there for a number of years now. Dan's known him for, you know, since his old factory. Some of them left this old factory that joined him. Dan's there, another guy, excuse me, Ben's there. You know, so we're in communication. So, you know, and we have a couple of owners that are there a lot too. So it's not your typical factory. I mean, the reason why Chinese factories have had a bad name in the past was there was nobody that cared about snowboarding anywhere at the factory, and where we actually care about it. So we know what to look for. You know, we know what, if something comes out weird, that's like, that's not good, you know. Right. You're not making widgets, you're making snowboards, which you're passionate about. Yeah, and to be honest, I think we probably make the nicest snowboards in the world. I mean, I have a hard time seeing we can do anything and everybody else can do, and not too many people can do what we can do. So yeah, it's in China, but China is also easier to work in certain things too, like just getting things for like stamps, like foil stamps, things like that, you know, screens and different inks. No OSHA? Is that what it is? No OSHA over there? No, just everything's there. So, I mean, an hour away, like for me to do something here in the U.S., I have to get something from Alabama. I have to get something from California. I have to get some, you know, it's coming from everywhere. Right. You know, and we're down here, there in southern China, there's so many that the distribution centers for, you know, the European materials are all right there. You know, and then there's just a bunch of suppliers for everything there, everything you think of. You know, it's like, I want to try this material out. Well, there's, you know, 10 factories within 20 miles that make that stuff. So, versus here where I don't have that option. So where your factory is in China, are you surrounded by snowboarding factories or winter sports companies? I mean, how is that possible? China's a big place. Yeah, no, it's just, I mean, there's enough of our like our suppliers distribute other things. Mm-hmm. If they make steel edges is not their big market. They make a bunch of other stuff. So they carry the steel edges there that we're able to, you know, use. Same, you know, with inks, things like that. Or again, snowboarding is nothing over there as far as, you know, the business side of it. Yeah, it's not a big demand, but there's T-shirts being made, there's printing going on, there's emblems, there's stamps, there's whatever. So it's just everything's made there. It's awesome. So you can just kind of, it's like a kid in a candy store. You can, you know, you get machines made to do whatever you want. It's pretty cool. Right. It's like you're going to the grocery store instead of the butcher's shop. You know? Yeah, exactly.
Hey, what's up, guys? Beef here. I know you're probably kicking back in your room with your headphones on, or maybe you're in your car on the way to work, or maybe coming from work, and I just want to say thank you for tuning in and listening. It is people like you that make this worth it for guys like Mark and I to make these episodes for you. Please do us a favor. Will you please rate us, share us, tell your friends, spread the word. We want to be able to keep making this happen. And if you can also go to patreon.com/the Snowboard Project, you can check us out and you can help us keep creating creating these podcasts for you. We are an independent voice in snowboard media, meaning we don't have anybody, that we are beholden to. We don't have anybody that says, hey, maybe you shouldn't talk about that. And that is why this is special. So thank you for being a supporter of that. If you feel like supporting us, or if you don't, hey, either way, at least you're tuning in. So please share, please like, please rate, please let us know how we can be better. Patreon.com/The Snowboard Project.
How many how many different brands, we'll call them brands, do you manufacture boards for?
Typically in a given, we're right around 30 different brands a year.
And most of those are smaller brands or more niche brands?
There's a couple decent sized ones for us that would probably be small brands for other factories. But yeah, we have a lot of definitely smaller brands. But those brands are those brands are fun in a way too, because they're, I used to work on boards that don't get made very much. They're, it's kind of what's cool in the market now, but, it's just fun. It's not just making twins over and over and over again. So it's a lot of powder shapes, carving shapes, a lot of splits. So it's pretty cool. So
let's say someone is like, okay, I'm going to start a company. I need to find a manufacturer. They find you, let's say, they get in touch with you. How involved are you in the process of making their boards or designing their boards? I mean, obviously you're making them, the physical product, but how involved are you in the design? Is it usually just someone who has like a brand idea, or are they like, this is the exact board I want, this is the flex I want, how involved are you in that process of actually, nailing down the final design?
Between Dan and I, a lot. I do usually with the customers, if they want a new shape, I'll typically design the shape. Mm-hmm. They'll give me like, I want a 156, something like that. And, they don't necessarily know how much taper they want. They just have a general look. They might go, I want a Burton Air tail. I want a this nose from this board or something. And, and it's for this. And then I just, I've done enough boards and kind of get an idea of what they want. And then I just do it. Some customers actually have a lot more input and actually send me drawings. And then I just, if I need to make a tweak, I'll tweak it. Or if there's something we can't quite, hey, I wouldn't do this. I talk with it over him and I just redo it for them. And yeah, same with constructions. They, especially if they're coming from America where they don't have as many options, where we're using a little bit more, we're actually making every core is custom. So, which is unique to us. And most factories, they pretty much, here's your 3 cores to choose from. That's it. So yeah, we're able to work with them on that, putting different materials in there. So
cool. And
so it's pretty
what are
we do a lot for them.
It sounds like it. So what are your 3 favorite board designs that are out there? From the past or the present, like your favorite 3 shapes.
Well, actually, we did a little in-house brand just for the. We did it really just to test a few materials. We're like, hey, let's just do it. So we have Telos is a brand we started, and we have the board's called Backslash. Mm-hmm. And only comes in 2 sizes. We need to do one more bigger size because I need a bigger size. But that board I loved it, and everybody I talked to loved it, and did really well at the Jackson Hole powwow. Got a whatever ultimate thing award. I just had a lot of people talking to me about it, and so that was fun. Another board I liked was Darwin.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think of another board.
That might have been one of leading towards the trend of short fat, right? The Darwin. I mean, that was kind of one of the first kind of shorter POW boards that I remember.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, we didn't go super fat with it or super short, kind of like just put our toes in the water in that one. And but that was something for Flow was, Flow was very conservative as far as we basically had to do something that people would buy, which, kind of ties your hands a lot. It wasn't like we never thought of it. It was just we couldn't really do it. And so we kind of were able to finally do that, and that was really a fun project too. So that one actually had the ABT base on there as well, which that had a 3D base, so that was pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
The other boards, I think I was always a big fan of Solitude. Trying to think of which one was my favorite.
How much did those designs change over the years? Because, the Solitude stayed in the Flow line for a number of years. How much does that board change from year to year?
Oh, man, I was trying to think which one. I think changed a ton. I think it went through, 5 reshapings. So, it changed a lot.
Is that more for sales or performance? Because it seems like maybe you're doing it for the reason of like, okay, the salesmen need to be like, this is an all new Solitude. We've changed this, and this, so you got to carry the new one. Instead of being like, hey man, this is the Solitude, the known and loved, the rock solid performer that sells through.
There was changes that need to be changed to kind of help sales.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there was a big change going from a camber to a rocker.
Mm-hmm.
These rocker at that point was really tough to sell a camber board. We had to sell rockers, so we got stuck with that. And then we went into more of the like a POW camber, so it had an early rise nose. Mm-hmm. Those types. So it had camber, setback camber with a little bit of an early rise nose and tail. That was really nice. So each board goes through, each change went through a whole new shape as well too. So I changed side cuts for, if it's a camber, I don't have the same side cut for a camber as I do for a rocker.
And why is that?
Just got because the board's doing different things. So like the rocker board's already bent in the middle. So if I have a normal side cut on there, it just kind of, for me, it just overturns a bit too much. So like for a rocker board, I mellow out the side cut between the feet where the rocker is, because the rocker is actually giving it kind of the turning radius of it.
Right, you're already. It's almost initiating the turn. You're almost already in the turn.
Right. So I would do different edge tuning for the rockers too, right there as well. So it was definitely that really helped me. Just in my first rocker board I wrote was one I made. And that would actually help me out a lot. And then, because at that time I didn't have a factory. We had just left GST. We're moving to China, and I didn't have a factory in China yet. And rocker was all the rage. So I was like, crap. So it was like, literally had a prototype myself in my garage again. So.
Right. So you actually had a number of garage factories over the years.
Yes, I did.
Okay, cool. Well, go ahead.
Actually, that board, my very first rocker board was actually the very first one I did was an old Illuminati board I had made, and I had just I took off the fiberglass in the middle of the board. I vacuumed back that one. I put some fiberglass down and just some weights and put it between some sawhorses, and just to give it a rocker. And it was literally that simple. No control of how much rocker it's going to have. I just guessed. I'm like, well, it's going to probably pop back a bit. So just gave it a whirl, and that thing rode really well, and actually had a side cut that I wanted to use for a rocker board. And so it actually, so it worked out really well, and took it to Hood, and 2 days later, and it's like, here we go.
Okay,
I was happy.
So one more question for the first part of our interview, and then I got a real exciting part for our second part. You can tune in tomorrow. It's going to be a 2-day interview. But One last question here. What's like the most valuable learning experience, positive or negative, that you had through all these board designs, through different factories and places and people? What's kind of the lesson that stuck with you and that you still think about on an ongoing basis?
I think as a designer, you have to watch your own ego a bit. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm good, or I'm doing something well. And there's always, whenever you get like a little bit big-headed at all, there's always something waiting to slap you down. So I think being able to realize you can make mistakes and realize that, have the ability to learn from a mistake is actually invaluable. So that for me has been the biggest part. And I've made mistakes over the years and just like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? But it became a very good lesson that I know to this day. So I never just relax and go, oh yeah, here it is, it's done. No, everything has to be scrutinized from design to production. And so when you're big-headed, you skip steps. So that was the thing, is just being a little bit more humble and realizing, hey, you can screw up, don't overlook something.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you, Eric Luthart, legendary board designer, maker of about 30 brands worth of snowboards and some really interesting brands that I can't mention. That has been part 1 of our interview. So thanks, Eric.
Thank you. And I'm also, I'm definitely the best board designer on my block, for sure. Got that one.
No doubt.
On behalf of Mark Sullivan and the Beeve, thanks for listening to the Snowboard Project. Remember, ride fast, take chances, dream big, and take action. And for God's sake, don't forget to support advertising-free snowboarding media at patreon.com. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project. The Snowboard Project.